This is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV Prime. In association with Micromax. Nothing like anything.
India is now firmly the place to start up. Entrepreneurs are the buzzword and entrepreneurship very mainstream. The government has made it evident that entrepreneurs are on the list of its priorities, all courtesy the terrific ideas and innovation that characterize Indian startups. So what do they really need to scale up and become a driving force in the Indian economy? In our special focus ahead of the budget, that's what we are looking at today. A special panel with me. Let me introduce them right away. Raghav Chandra, co-founder Urban Clap, a mobile services marketplace. Amit Singh, co-founder Shuttle, a Gurgaon-based bus aggregator. Sairi Chahal, founder Sheroes, an online career destination for women. And Akshay Saxena, co-founder of Avanti, someone who's providing low-income students education to crack competitive exams. Thanks all so much for taking our time to speak to us. Raghav, first up to you. Now, what you're doing is basically providing all those people with skills, say, of being an electrician, carpenter, beauty services, and just it's endless, or even say something like fitness, to come on your platform and get employment, whether it's short-term, long-term, get some sort of employment. Now, we're looking at the startup space where at present there's anywhere between 80,000 to a lakh people being employed just by our startups. That number is likely to go up by 2020. There's going to be 11,500 startups employing 250,000 people. If I were to ask you, what do you need to sort of scale up this employment immediately, what would you say?
I think two parts. Startups directly employing, this is for their own workbench, and new age startups now, especially the tech ones, being more of these marketplaces where they're almost setting up this infrastructure to better employment, set standards. I think particularly what would help is just internal workings, because these are mostly tech-driven companies, and as a company, you do not want to spend too much of time dealing with paperwork, government work, taxation information. Like, for example, for us to do verifications, police verifications, background checks, it's a very, very laborious process, and there's no clear way to do it. Right? I think just spending more time, spending more of that budget onto infrastructure projects would help a lot.
Right. So doing that would actually help you focus then more on this and perhaps give an opportunity to so many others to sort of get on this platform. Sari, as someone who's helping all those women who perhaps have been wondering how to get back into the workforce, giving them a chance, so something similar to what Urban Clap is doing here. She was also trying to say, come in for a few hours, choose your field. What has been the most frustrating part of sort of getting these women back in?
I think, let's just say, there's this whole big opportunity out there, because our biggest asset is human capital. However, I think internet penetration and broadband penetration, I think, there's a whole lot of other debates going on, because of precisely this issue. I think as a government, I think there's an opportunity to bring everybody online, to make sure everybody is accessible via a smartphone. And I think the level of opportunities that can reach to people, even in the remote parts of the country, will suddenly sort of multiply many-fold. And second is what Raghav said, digital governance.
So get these opportunities to everybody. People who perhaps don't have them and now beyond the big cities.
Absolutely. So what we're really doing is putting together this whole ecosystem, and people can only partake from that ecosystem if everybody's online, everybody has high-speed internet.
It's quite clear, Amit, saying that the next round of jobs, everyone's going on saying, is not going to come from old manufacturing. It's going to come from people like you. It's going to come from startups. It's going to come from entrepreneurship. What's getting in the way?
So actually, if you look at it, if the business prospers, then everything falls in place. There are two ways. You can do a grounds up kind of a thing, Or you can have a top-down approach, wherein if the startup keeps becoming bigger and bigger, it will cater to more people, it will cater to more customers, it will lead more vendors, more drivers, more partners, and that will fall in place. So as long as the business bottlenecks are getting removed, I think this will fall in place. That is what capitalism has done over the years, and we just need to fast pace it, and startups are the best place to do that.
And on your journey, Akshay, what is the one thing that you believe has helped you do that, and the one thing that has perhaps got in the way?
So, I mean, I think, as most people have mentioned here, the thing that's our biggest asset is our human capital, right? I think people's drive to succeed, people's drive to move up the, the socioeconomic ladder is really our biggest asset. What's gotten in the way in some ways is the development of that very human capital. So I'll take a slightly different tack here, right? So, we really don't use the internet that much. We run a brick and mortar business. And I think if you look through education, which is where I work, there is not one large venture-backed school chain, right? And the reason that is regulation. So, while there's been great initiatives announced for at Startup India for startups themselves, as Raghav said, the problem actually is regulations for everything else. Schools are over-regulated, regulated incorrectly. The government system is impossible to work with. Every company that's ever worked with the government, which is in some ways the largest employer and service provider in this country, has had huge accounts receivables, money not paid to them. So in some ways, if we really want to develop human capital, we need to first get our act in order on things like education, healthcare, infrastructure, roads.
Sure.
And that's really what's holding our country back.
Right, but given all the focus, Amit, if I were to ask you, given all the focus and the fact that people like you are now being celebrated, we're talking about days devoted to startups, devoted to celebrating entrepreneurship. Do you believe that there's a genuine attempt by everybody, all the stakeholders beyond just the government, to sort of try and address the issues that all of you have faced, the ones that Akshay in particular brought up?
The problem that we are facing is that while at the policy level things are very clear, but the ground level implementation is very different. So those friction, that kind of friction, if that communication has to go deep down, once that happens, I think a lot of things will start.
And that is of course very important, because over and over again you have people saying that it's the idea has got to be great, of course, but it's the execution that's eventually going to determine whether that idea is going to sort of be the big game changer.
Big game changer, absolutely. The other thing, I think interestingly, like what you said, one very recent trend we've seen is professionals moving to public policy, right? So if you look at the current government, Mr. Sinha and Mr. Khan, they're all professionals, the top order, and a lot of policy building is in their hands. I think down the line, a lot more of real good professional talent also needs to move to public policy, because it's in the execution ultimately, and I think at some point some of
we need those doers, basically.
We need those doers who also know how to metricize and measure success.
72% of startup founders are under 30 or 32 years of age, and that's the kind of sort of, I think, the age group that you're sort of talking about, that sort of understands, because all of you are sort of disruptors and innovating at a pace, and I think the challenge would be even for the government or the bureaucracy to try and keep pace.
So that is one. See, a lot of things have happened in a particular way in our organization, in a country. Historically. So now suddenly, technology is taking a very different stance of things. So that appreciation has to come, from a wider audience, and that is, that has been the journey, across the world. The Ubers are facing that challenge, the shuttles are facing that challenge. That is one. And the second part, is that, like say for smart cities, the way the tendering process is, the way the whole ecosystem works is, you want a big company which is of that much net worth to come and participate in that process. But when you're talking about technology, when you're talking about smart cities, you're talking about technology, then you should be talking about startups. And when you're talking about startups, they cannot have that network, they cannot have that kind of run. So all those things have to be rethought, reimagined. And that is a lot of work.
I think it was an important point that there's no one size fits all when you talk about startups. They're sort of changing the dynamics, as it were, every day. But what is the one thing that you want to hear? I mean, many people are, of course, asking that after the big ticket announcements in early January for startups, what we'll hear from the budget. But if there was one thing that you want to hear the finance minister say this month, what should it be?
My wish list point number one is where's all the digitalization coming in, and when is it actually happening?
Right. The point that Sairi really raised, that when is sort of going to get all of India onto these tech platforms, what would it be for you, Akshay?
Fixed education. I think, it's all well and good to make these front-end announcements. I think the one thing that's been very apparent in most announcements is there's been almost no focus on actual school education. And like Sairi said, the jobs of tomorrow are not going to be plumbers, welders and fitters, right? The jobs of tomorrow that people will aspire to are going to be white-collar jobs.
Right.
And our school systems are appallingly bad. We are third last in the world. And this government continues to cut down on education budgets, do nothing really to innovative or interesting about how to disrupt how kids are going to school in this country.
I have two very simple wishes. One, I hope he doesn't increase the service tax, because I think we're right there. That's enough. Two, I think we've been cutting healthcare spends as a country, and education spends. That's not a great long-term thing for any country. I think we've seen that impact, and these are two very fundamental nation-building pillars, and I think government needs to take a little more step into it.
Right.
So I think it's a very generic statement, but I think the right to disrupt the incumbent should be there. We cannot be protecting the incumbent which is inefficient. If we are talking about progress and development, we have to be ready for disruption. Disruption is not a good word. It's a good word for startups, but not so good for the incumbents.
People who understand technology and business in the government, because I guess
I think the point that you made, that jobs of the future, I think challenges of the future, and sort of identifying the problems and the lacuna that we'll be facing in the future is also, of course, is what we need desperately at this moment. But we're going to slip into a quick break on that note, but stay with us. What would you want if you are an entrepreneur? What do you believe that startups really need from the government, and what should the government do? Keep your thoughts coming in. You can remember, you can keep writing into us. We're slipping into a quick break. Back with more.